Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. Without wasting any more time, let's get into our stories of the day. Our first story is by beerbellybegone. Boss, think about whether or not you want to keep working here. Me? Okay, I don't. Nearly 2 years ago, I started work at company as their digital marketing person. After I started, it turned out that I was brought in to put out the fires left by my predecessor, the VP of marketing, who had a team of 4 plus himself, spent over $1 million in 1 year, and brought in 5 deals, 2 of them for under 10 grand. As you can well imagine, after a performance like that, I had lots of work to do, and very little to do it with. Aside from 1 or 2 paid tools, everything else was to be done using free tools only. I'm gonna do some bragging here. I beat the previous year's figures in all categories with 10% of the budget. When I started, I thought Boss Man, founder/CEO, had a really good management style, saying things like, "Your successes are yours, your mistakes are mine," and "The enemy of good is great. I don't expect perfection. I want to make sure things work and get them done." In essence, I was allowed to run my own one-man department and outsourced freelancers, and as long as I was getting results, he left me alone. Since I was the only person on the marketing team, I also had to learn a large number of skills and platforms that weren't directly related to digital marketing. Not to say everything was perfect, but things were pretty good. One of the main things that weren't perfect was that Boss Man had serious anger management issues. As I said before, he left me alone, but I saw him blow up and fire other people for stupid stuff. He lost it at me too once or twice, but he'd calm down after a couple of hours and things would be back to normal. If it looks like an abusive relationship, that's because looking back, that's exactly what it was. As the year came to an end, I approached Boss and initiated a performance review. I ran him through everything I had done in the past year, and he was pretty surprised at how much I had done with so little. I asked him for a raise, pointing out that I was currently making $8,000 a month in local currency. Average is $4,500 a month. When people with my, now augmented, skill set were making between $13,000 to $14,000 a month. I asked him for about $12,000. He said he'd get back to me and never did. Every time I asked him about my raise, he had another excuse. After the last excuse, I began looking for something else. The other day we had a meeting, and it turns out that 2 months ago I made a mistake. It wasn't a critical mistake, and it was rectified within a few hours of discovering the mistake. No harm or damage was caused whatsoever to company, but Boss Man flipping lost it. I mean, slamming on tables, yelling for the whole office to hear, what have you. Then he said the magic words. "Pack your things up and go home. Think about whether or not you want to keep working here." So that's what I did. And 10 seconds later I said, "No, I don't." I started packing my stuff up while he turned an even deeper shade of red and got even louder. I didn't answer him at all. Just kept on packing up my things and said goodbye to my colleagues. Turns out that being ignored really pushed his buttons to the point where he started threatening to call security to have me removed while I was actively removing myself and my things from the office. Here's the part where it gets beautiful. My country is very strict on employees' rights. Sorry Americans, I feel your pain. His words and behavior are considered an improper dismissal. By law, he's required to give me 30 days notice of dismissal, which he didn't. When he realized his mistake, he convened a pre-dismissal hearing, but it was already too late. He's opened himself up to a lawsuit, which I'm already talking with lawyers about. Because by law, he has to give me those 30 days notice even though he already fired me. For the next 30 days, I'm eligible for all the benefits and social rights in my salary, but I can do jack shoot for him and there's nothing he can do to me without making the incoming lawsuit 10 times worse. I've already got 4 interviews lined up for next week, paying almost double what Boss was paying me, and best of all, I'll be interviewing for other places on his dime. The cherry on top is that because I'm the only marketing person, without me, nothing happens in the marketing department for the next month. And if he doesn't hire someone on in time, I won't be around to answer any questions the new person might have. I'm glad to hear OP is sticking up for themselves. When you have intrinsic value to whatever company you work for, and you know you're getting paid below market value, I think it's fair to have an honest and open discussion with your employers about how you deserve adequate pay. Knowing that his boss never even got back to him when he asked for a very honest pay rate below market value still, and then was flipping out at employees and saying stuff like, "Go home and figure out if you want to work here," I think OP is more than justified to keep the legal proceedings going and basically get back what he's owed and more than worth. Do you guys agree with me? Let me know in the comments below. Our next story is by benbrangwyn. You'd better rectify this freaking mess you've caused. Okay, but you're not gonna like the result. Bit of background. I'd been working for a kick-butt medium-sized IT company for about 4 years. I had a very good track record but had moved to a department that didn't really fit my skills, and very tall director told me I wasn't needed anymore. I thought I was out of a job completely, but managing director called me in, told me that the company needed to implement ISO 9000, a quality standard that aims to formalize all of those processes and roles that contribute directly and indirectly to the quality of the company's products. He offered me a job partnering up with an external consultant, hereafter consultant. Consultant would project manage the effort, while I was to be his assistant and full-time liaison person within the company. I later learned that consultant was a personal friend of managing director. Of course, I said yes. Consultant was a nice enough person, but it soon became clear that he was out of his depth with the complexities of the project. Luckily, I had a coach, my brother-in-law, who was very experienced in this area and saw the warning signs when I talked about what we were doing. Within the company, there was a lot of skepticism because of an earlier failed project titled Quality Without Limits that soon became Limits Without Quality. So this time around we needed credibility, some quick visible wins, and senior management backing. However, the managing director left the company and that kinda screwed up the senior management backing for consultant. Worse, the new CEO was the very tall director, hereafter very tall CEO, who'd fired me earlier, and although he knew it was important, he didn't really want any involvement in the ISO 9000 project. Fast forward a couple of months and we haven't really achieved much. My relationship with consultant is getting a bit strained as I start wondering if I might become collateral damage of his lack of skills and leadership. Consultant asks me to book a few grand's worth of training for the two of us. I had to do it by a certain date. The date passed, he asked about the training, I said I hadn't booked it. He blew up to level 5 and demanded to know why. I said I didn't think he'd secured sufficient commitment from management to spend that much, and I didn't want to get stuck with an unauthorized spend. Now he's at level 10 and the poop started flying. I was a bit taller than him and he wanted to go into uber domination mode, so… Consultant says, "Sit down." I'm comfortable standing, thanks. "Sit down." I'll stay here. "Sit the freak down." Me, shaking a bit but outwardly calm, "I'm good." "You need to get yourself to the freaking CEO, explain your failure to book the training and that you're the reason we're going to miss our first big deadline, and rectify this freaking mess you've caused." I really didn't know what very tall CEO would do and that there was a very good chance I'd get thrown off the project and fired. Again. But it was time to come clean. So here's how I obeyed the "rectify this freaking mess" instruction. I got a meeting same day with very tall CEO and told them that we had barely achieved anything over the several months the project had been running. I said that consultant was inept, hadn't grasped the basic concepts of the project, and that with him in the project manager role, it was destined for an expensive failure. I told them about the "sit down" episode. I also told very tall CEO of another person in the company who I had approached obliquely earlier in the week, who I reckoned would be a perfect fit for the project manager role. This was late on a Friday and very tall CEO said, "Leave it with me," and told me not to turn up till noon on Monday. I absolutely didn't know what was going to happen and that weekend was really stressful. Monday morning, I get a call from consultant, which I ignore. Nerves shredding. Now it's noon on Monday and I'm in the building. I'm kinda bricking it. I'm outside the very tall CEO's office and he's there with the guy I suggested should be the new project manager. Good sign. They're laughing about something. Another good sign? I walk in. Very tall CEO says, "Hi, meet your new boss." Me thinking, shoot, that went well. Excellent, what happened? Very tall CEO says, "Well, I called consultant into this office this morning and we had a chat." Me warming up, and? I told him we needed a serious talk about the project and invited him to sit down. He started getting agitated and declined. I asked again. He refused. I said, "Either you sit down or leave the building right now." Consultant sat down and I explained I wanted to make some changes. Net, he left the building with all the stuff anyway an hour later, but only after I told him why we didn't want him any longer. Me, empty speech bubbles coming out of my mouth. CEO says, "Thought you might like the bit about him sitting down." Me, still speechless. My new boss to me, "Okay, come on, let's have a catch up." I was on frickin' cloud 9 for a few days and new boss was an absolute star and I learned a ton from him. ISO 9000 certification followed and that project success opened up very interesting doors later. I'm glad Very Tall CEO turned out to be an actually good CEO. When OP went to them and explained their concerns with the consultant about how they were inept and wasting money and how they had some fascination with height and sitting down and stuff, CEO actually took those concerns and weighed them and made a good decision that made everything good for the company and OP. Our next story, written by Board and Beard, is titled, "Boss sent me on a BS task, so I accepted." Another blast from the past, and this time some good-humored compliance. I was working for an audio video/PC rental company with a decent-sized warehouse. We were tasked with building shelving to reorganize and build a small working space for the warehouse crew. A few co-workers, the boss, and I were all tearing things down, rebuilding, running back and forth from the hardware store to get wood. It was generally a fun day for me, where I didn't have to worry about timelines for getting things in and out of the door. The boss, about 4 hours into my day, calls out, "OP, these boards are too short. Go get the stud stretcher." "Okay, boss, where should I look?" "Look all over and find one. We needed to finish this. Don't come back without an answer for me." He figured I wouldn't know that a stud stretcher wasn't real. After all, I was pretty young and a lot of people thought pretty dumb. He figured it would be some light hazing. So I rolled with it. Off I went for a non-existent product. First I looked at the cafe down the road and inquired about one while I got a sandwich. I checked at the convenience store when I stopped to get some tea. I checked all around the storage cubby we were going to clean out while I made a little nest to take a nap in. I checked with myself a few times before and after I took a short nap. All in all, I wasted about 2 hours looking for something I knew wouldn't exist. Coming back to the boss, he laughed and had a grand time poking fun at me wasting time while on the clock looking for something fake. I just, "Aw shucks, boss," answered a few times. About a week later, when we went out for a drink, I told him what I did. Luckily, he laughed and owned up that it was on him for sending me on the task. No harm, no foul, but hey, I got a paid lunch and a nap. Now this is a dream. Imagine having a couple hours where you just get to walk away from your job. A nap might be high on my list of what I'd want to do, but I'd be afraid that I'd sleep too long. Grabbing a bite to eat, that's also a great idea. If you had the opportunity, what would you want to do? Would you want to go grab a bite to eat? Would you want to take a nap? Would you want to go see like a short movie or something? What would you do? If I was close enough, maybe I'd just go home and pet my dog for a while, I don't know. And our final story of the day is written by British Lass 89. Give me an option, I'll make my choice. I was in 4th year of high school and our usual maths teacher was out. We got a sub, Mr. G, who set off my anxiety. Was a nice enough guy but gave me the heebie-jeebies. I was a mostly well-behaved kid but would cut his class whenever possible, gave short answers, etc., so he wasn't too keen on me. I take notes down differently, shorthand since that's how I learn. One day, Mr. G sees my notes and says I need to rewrite them. I refuse, so he scores a pen through them, saying to write them again. I refuse, saying I can still read them. Mr. G then gives two options: rewrite the notes or get out of his class. So I pack up my stuff, stand up, and walk towards the door. Mr. G says, "Where are you going?" "You gave me an option, so I'm leaving." He started shouting about how he didn't mean it literally, which brought the head of maths to the classroom. Mr. G tried to say I tried to leave without permission when a few classmates backed me up with the malicious compliance. Head of maths couldn't figure out what was the problem and let me sit in the base for the rest of the year. For clarification, I found out in the comments that base is what they call their base of operations. It's like where paperwork is stored and where tutoring can take place. That being said, this story is disappointing to hear. I would hope a teacher who sees a kid that's not very active in class or not showing up enough would be able to try and work around that and encourage them in ways that work for them. If taking notes shorthand is a way that they can learn effectively, it shouldn't be tarnished because you prefer a different format. Teaching and learning, I think, is such a complex thing where people have so many different styles that work effectively for them that you can't paint the borders a certain way and expect that to always work. I don't want to ramble, but I just think it should be a place where you should encourage what works for those students and just try and be an encouraging teacher. I think you need a lot of patience if you're going to work in that field. Apologies for the slightly long recap, but with that being said, that's all the stories we have for today. If you had a favorite of all these stories that I read, let me know in the comment section down below. And if you could, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing if you haven't. They're both such an invaluable way to help out the channel, and doing any of those means a lot to me. So whether you liked, commented, subscribed, or just merely watched the video, thank you all so much for giving a part of your day to the Storytime channel. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.